使玩家感觉良好 Dead Cells 开发回顾，讲者为 Sebastien Benard。Sebastien Benard 花了大半人生在开发各种游戏，喜欢制作游戏更胜于游玩。多年来都是使用名为 Hex 的程式语言来开发专案，他完成了不少，但也舍弃了不少。他经常参加各种 Game Jam， 也曾在几个比赛获奖过。而本议程的主题 Dead Cells 对他的团队来说是一个很大的惊喜。抢先体验推出以来，玩家的回馈与接受度都相当的正面。在议程中，他将跟大家分享如何活过抢先体验阶段，以及哪些细节让人感觉游戏恰到好处。让我们以热烈的掌声欢迎 Sebastien Benard。You choose.
Can I unput because I would like to bring it with me, please? Oh yes, can I take it?
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome.
Oh, sorry. Hello everyone. So thank you, really thank you for coming, and especially because this is the last talk. So also a great thanks for everyone who organized this, and I think we should maybe clap for the organizer because. So my talk today is it's some kind of post-mortem about Dead Cells. Just so I see who you are. Did someone play Dead Cells in the room, or did you know maybe it? Oh, cool. Oh, okay, okay. So I was afraid. So now I'm totally scared. Okay. So this is a talk about Dead Cells in some way because I will use our experience on making this game on early access on PC and console. But it's really not exactly all about that. So first thing first. So who is this guy? So my name is Sebastien Benard, and thank you for pronouncing it right, because even in France, people just usually make a mistake. So my name is Sebastien Benard, so I'm used to be known as Deepnight on internet. It really depends. I'm a game developer, also a game designer. I work in a company which is called Motion Twin. I've been here in this company for like 17, 18 years now, so it's quite a long time. We used to make games for 17 years, but it was mostly, up in the 2000s, and it was Flash and web games. And most recently, we decided to go all in on a last chance game, which was Dead Cells, and hopefully it actually succeeded. So, Dead Cells. And if you need to contact me, please feel free. I will put it back at the end. So, also, if don't bother taking pictures during the talk because I will give you the link at the end. You just have to take a picture of the last link, so we will have the whole talk. So you can contact me on Twitter, on my email, and feel free to ask anything. Just so you know, I don't have any kind of secret about the game, the figures, the numbers, on the sales, on everything. I, of course, cannot talk about everything live, but if you ask me a question, I can pretty much answer any question. So feel free. Oh, by the way, the game just got released. It was 2 days ago. So if you didn't buy it, just go buy it, please. Especially if you like this talk. So it's available on PC, Mac, Linux, consoles, Switch, of course, because best. So also before this talk, so you understand the way I think and the way I explain things, I like to take care of details, like a lot. I mean, for me, making a games is really about taking care of the small, very small, basic things. So this talk is really all about that. And also, I'm a developer, but also a game designer. But I do prefer coding. But game design is really, I'm a game designer on Dead Cells. So I love balancing things and making sure that the jump curve is like perfect and like in a Nazi way, you know. And I like to make things right. So that's also, it will explain a little bit what I will show you after a while. And I believe in one thing, which is you can say some things, some events are accidental, but most of the time I think you can actually think back on events and analyze what you did, and you can take a few rules or ideas or things that you can learn from your past experience. So I think you can actually define rule sets for pretty much anything. So I don't pretend that we can actually make another Dead Cells. We don't want to make a Dead Cells 2, by the way. But I don't pretend that everything can be applied again. But I think you can get a few things that might be interesting if you are also into making games. So that helps you to figure out. So today I'm about to talk about one thing, which are core loops. Also, if you Google it, you will see you have many different definitions of what a core loop is. It's kind of randomly generated, depending on who you're talking about. A core loop, if you're talking to a marketing guy, to someone who is into UI and UX, interface and everything, or if you're talking to a game designer, a core loop is something different. So to make things clear, I will take some time here to explain what I think are core loops, at least from my point of view, and to explain why I think it's really important, like really important. So let's talk about core loops. So let's take a random game like Mario, and let's analyze what are the loops in this game. For example, in Mario, you have a very global loop, which is you start a new game, you play, and something bad happens and you die, or you just reach the end of the game. So this is a global loop. So you play the game and it ends. Inside this loop, you have actually smaller ones, like you enter a level, you play it, and you find the exit, or you die. And you do that multiple times in single playthrough. So this is a smaller core loop. And you have even smaller loops, which are my core loops, which is like in Mario, you just break blocks and you get loot. This is just a basic thing that you do a lot, and you break blocks and get loot. You can shoot enemies and score, for example. This is another example of a very basic core loop, just something that you do repeatedly. And you can, for example, if it's an adventure game, a text-based game, it's maybe ask question, get clues. You know, this kind of small loops, small things that you do. And the whole point of this talk is all about that. Those small core loops, those small basic things that you do in your game that your player will actually do. So my definition is quite simple, actually. For me, a core loop is just the basic thing that your player will actually do from the beginning till the end of your game. It's not about, for example, Dead Cells is a Roguevania and this kind of bullshit, but it's just about what your player will actually do in your game. What is the concrete action that you will actually achieve in your game? It's very important that you understand that a core loop is not a unique selling point. It's not something which is like the marketing thing that you will say in stores or in interviews or anything. For example, once again, if I describe Dead Cells to a marketing guy, I would say, okay, it's a Roguevania, it's a mix between roguelike and Castlevania kind of game. So it's like a Castlevania that you can replay. But that's a unique selling point. It's more like, what is the game as a global concept. But in this game, basically, you just jump, kill enemies, and you just explore levels, you try to find the exit, and hopefully you try not to die. So this is different, you see? Core loops are real actions that the player will do in your game, basic things. And what is it useful for? First thing first, when you create a game, when you know what your core loops are, you can actually prototype your game in a little bit faster way because you know what your player will actually do in your final game, so you can prototype that right away. You don't have to wait later for making a good 2D platform engine. You don't have to wait the end of the production to make a good text engine if you're a text-based game. So it's easier for prototyping because you know right away what will be the concrete actions that your player will have to do, and you can do from the prototype phase, you can make it fun right away at the beginning. It also allows you to focus because we are not like unlimited pool of energy. We have really a limited amount of time. We cannot afford to do like every crazy idea that you have in a game. And most of the time you will have to focus on specific things. So knowing what are your core loops actually allow you to focus on these basic things that the player will actually do. It's not to not do everything else, but it's really how to dispatch your mana. So you have a limited amount of mana, so it's a good way to understand what is important, what is not important, and what can be done later. So core loops, I suggest most of the time, do that at the beginning and make sure the basic is fine. This is the kind of things that you hear a lot in development. When someone says that, it's almost like the Godwin point of game development. If someone says, okay, it's not fun right now, the game is not fun right now, but don't worry, we'll have more content and it will be fun maybe later, I'm not sure. So most of the time this is so fucking wrong. Like honestly. Most of the time, it's not 100% false, of course. But most of the time, when you have something which is not fun and it relies on adding more content to make it actually fun, that's something which is probably a problem. Because maybe there is a problem at the core, you know. Maybe this thing is just not fun at all. Maybe it will require too much assets and too much new content to make it actually worth it. So sometimes when you have someone who says that, it should trigger like a warning. And it's also useful to know your core loops to identify this kind of situation. And the whole point is actually trying to make your core loops perfect, or not perfect, as good as possible. Because perfection, of course, is not something that does exist. But when you know your core loops, when you know what your game is really about, what actions your player will do in your game, it's easier to make them good. I mean, like really good. I like really, really good. Not perfect, but make them right. So this is it for core loops. So now let's talk about dead cells. So for people who don't know the game yet, this is it's a quite an old trailer, but I like it because it really shows how the game works. So this is dead cells. This was the early access trailer. So as you can see, we've been on early access for 1 year and a half now. So dead cells, the marketing bullshit, which is I love marketing, so don't take me wrong here. But the marketing bullshit is describing as a Roguevania. It's actually a mix between a roguelike and a Castlevania kind of thing. And this word was quite useful for us because it allowed us to explain quickly what the game is really all about. It's really a mix between like a Castlevania that you can replay. So this is the unique selling point and the marketing thing and the description of the game. And as you can see, you die a lot in this game, and each time you die, you get back at the beginning. This is a very important point because it defined lots of choices that we made for the game. But basically, this game is really just about jumping around and killing enemies. That's really what you will do most of the time, like for 100 hours. You will just do that, jumping around and killing enemies. Of course, you have many different ways to kill enemies, and fun ones and very stupid ones, but this is really all about that. So core loops are evolving around this, jumping and fighting. It's sold on PC for early access only. It's sold almost 1 million copies on PC. And so it's now available on console too. So I don't have the figures right now, but in a few days, if you ask me, I can give you a little bit more insight about that. And we've been, as I said, 1 year and a half on early access. It's at first we estimated for 1 year. We announced it for 1 year early access because we didn't want to stay too long on early access because it was in the apocalypse, and that's not a good thing to go on early access. So we decided to go for 1 year, but we finally made 1 year and 6 months. But I will talk about that at the end. So Dead Cells is really about two things. It's about traversal, which is exploring the level and jumping on platforms, and combat. So let's talk about traversal first. This is the first core loop of the game. Basically, you're just moving your character between platforms. This is really just that. This is not some kind of complicated thing. The player will actually do that from the beginning till the end. First thing, just a small tip here. If you're doing any kind of platformer game, if you want to have something which has tight controls and everything, seriously, don't go for any kind of physics engine. Don't use any kind of physics engine. This is a serious thing, because you will fight most of the time. You will fight your own physics engine. For example, if you need to do a double jump in the air, this is not realistic. This cannot be done. So you will have to modify a few things to allow for that. If you want to adjust the gravity, for example, if you jump and you want to adjust the gravity when falling and not when going up, that's something that you will have to modify. And this is, you will lose much time just fighting your own physics engine. So my recommendation here, this is a small parenthesis, don't use physics engine. Because most of the time you will want to do stupid things with your engine, and you will see in a few examples. Because it's something which is really important, we decided right away that we wanted to have the best, at least the best controls that we could do for a 2D platformer. We wanted to make sure that everything in the controls were perfect, almost as good as possible, as I said. So we decided from the beginning that, okay, it's about jumping on platform, so jumping on platform should be really fun. I mean, if the game was just that, it should be fun. So this was really a day one target. So let's see a classic situation. You will see it in a normal speed, and you will see it in slow-mo, so I can explain a few things about that. This is just a character jumping, double jump, and reaching the other end. Okay? So apparently, pretty much, except the double jump thing, everything was quite normal. Okay? Nothing too fancy here. But actually, when you analyze the thing a little bit, you will see a few strange things happening. So let's see that again in slow-mo. So the character is running. Oops, he's falling. Oh, he jumped, finally. Double jump. And he doesn't reach the end, but who cares? Okay? You see? This is really all about that. So that's why a physics engine will be a problem here, because just to do that with a physics engine will take really much time and will be like painful, like really painful. I say that because we started with a physics engine and we scrapped everything. So first thing, you saw this just-in-time jump. I mean, the player was on a platform, he left the platform, but anyway, he tried to jump and we allowed that. Okay, we said, you can jump. Because even you're not on the ground anymore, you still can jump. And this is something, this is a very small detail. But if you do play platformers, you instantly notice when a platformer doesn't have that. This very small detail is so important for making you feeling that jumping is not a tricky thing to do. It's just something very simple. And fun fact about this one, last year I was at TGS, at Tokyo Game Show, and during the business days there was some Japanese guy who come and played the game, and he was like looking really serious, and was like playing the game, and he told me, I really liked, this small detail, this small just-in-time thing. I noticed that when you jump, and you can actually jump for 2 frames or 2 or 3 frames after leaving the platform. And was like, okay, you're really surprised because normally no one noticed this kind of detail. And he told me, oh yes, I know that because we did that in our game, which was the Castlevania Symphony of the Night. And I was like, okay. So this guy was one of the developers of Castlevania. So that's the kind of thing that actually most good platformer games implement, because this is totally invisible for most players. But if you don't have that, you will see that you will have to anticipate all your jump, because if you don't anticipate or you try to jump on the border, you will actually fall most of the time. And when you have that, it's really a bad feeling. Also, we do have air control. With many games tend to have the double jump thing unlockable, something that you have to pay for in some way. And double jump should be, if you do a 2D platformer, which is not too realistic, double jump should be a core feature, in my opinion, because it makes really everything so much pleasant to do. So double jump is a small thing, but classic one, but don't lock that behind some kind of payment in-game or any kind of optional thing or unlockable thing. Metroid does that, but for example, in Metroid, most of the time you start with all the power-ups, then you lose everything, and then you can play. But at the beginning, you know that, okay, this is not a crappy platformer. They have double jump, and okay, I did play it at the beginning. But I should recommend not locking the double jump thing. Also, you can also, if you decide to go back while in air, you can also do that. You are not forced to do the wall jump. If you want to cancel and just to stop and fall, you can do that. Also, once again, if you have physics engine, you will have some difficulty to do that. And the cheating on arrival thing. So you saw the character was not exactly on the platform at the end, but because we detected that he was falling, he just jumped, and he was really about to reach this, but it was like 3 pixels away, we decided that, okay, we detect this situation, okay, we can teleport you right on the platform, because we understood what you were trying to do. And this is a situation where, a classic situation where everything is activated. We have all sorts of helpers like this that will cheat everywhere and making sure that your character is actually doing crazy things, but in a very simple way. So this is an example of this situation with every possible helpers activated. So now let's see the same situation with everything disabled. So the same parkour, but no helper at all, just you, double jump, and nothing else. So first thing, okay, no helper, so you just have to jump. Oh, once again, but double jump is, you have to double jump because it's a little bit too high. Oh, it's too high. And, oh, 2 pixels away, sorry. Okay, double jump again. Once again, oh, too short. It's becoming annoying at this point. And let's say no. So you see, it's at some point, the player will actually feel it's not its fault, it's the game's fault. He was really about to make it, and everyone was pretty sure that the jump was right, but actually he fell in the lava. So when you disable every kind of helpers on Dead Cells, actually it's really shitty to play, to be honest. But we did spend quite a huge amount of time making all these kind of small, every corner case that we found, every bad situation that we had, we fixed pretty much everything. And sometimes it was a bit tricky, but most of the time it was not that difficult. It required quite a lot of time, of course, but it was not a difficult task. And really it's useful. So the short takeaway for this is actually try to understand what your player wants to do. He is trying to do something in the game. He's trying to jump between 2 platforms or something like that. So you have to understand what your player is actually trying to do. And is this meant to be a challenge? I mean, is jumping between 2 platforms? Is it something which should be tricky in your game? Is it some kind of parkour-oriented game? Is this jump should be tricky? Most of the time, especially because Dead Cells is an action game, the answer is no. No, it's not meant to be tricky. It's just a basic jump, and you will do this kind of jump like 1,000 times in a single run. So it's not meant to be difficult. So if you know your player, if you know what your player is actually trying to do, and if it's not meant to be a challenge, just make sure anyway, cheat in any way you want, make sure your player actually succeeds in doing this action. There is no good reason for making him fall like in a ridiculous way like we saw before. It's really not useful. It does not make the game better, more difficult or anything, just make everything a little bit less pleasant to play. So, and why you should bother about that? Most of our reviews, positive reviews on this game, always start with the same thing. I mean, like pretty much 100% of this review says the same thing, which is the controls are fine. You know, it's smooth and it plays right. And it's not, you know, the Roguevania thing, for example. The Roguevania, the concept of the game never comes first. Most of the time, the first thing they say, it plays right. It's fluid, it's smooth, and it's responsive. So this is the most important thing for most people, and you know why? It's quite actually obvious when you do a game show, for example, at GDC or TGS or whatever. When you're giving the controller to the player, you will have maybe like 5 to 10 seconds to discover your game and to say, is it a good one, or I am feeling right with this game or not? And the first thing that you will see, it's not the fact it's a Roguevania, he doesn't care at this point, but he will try, jump and explore, and if that point feels right, it's like a hook at the beginning. You're pretty sure that if you do a good job at that, you're pretty sure it will be fine after a while. Just making sure that the basic things are easy to do. And let's talk about combat now. So basically combat is just hitting things with other things and making sure that they die. This is what combat is. So in Dead Cells, we have like 12 levels, a little bit more, but basically we just have 12 levels to explore, 12 areas to explore. And in each area, you would have like maybe 70 to 100 enemies. So that's a lot of enemies. So it means for a single run that you will probably kill like 1,000 enemies, which is a lot, really like a lot. And because it's a roguelike, when you die, you get back at the beginning. We don't want you to have a run that lasts like 4 hours because it will be really too frustrating. So there is an issue there. When you think of that, there is an issue which is, what about the repetitivity? And what about the run duration? It will be quite a long run to kill all these enemies in a single try. So we decided to address this in 2 ways. First thing first, the combat gameplay. Let's see a basic situation too. In slow-mo, so you can understand everything. So I just break the door. There is someone at the bottom, so I decided to dive on him. 2 enemies in front, one is shooting at me. So I decide to dodge and to go behind to kick his ass because I don't like him. And I decide to try the other one, but he's about to hit me, so I decide to cancel. And I decide to go, no, okay, I will go behind. And now I kill him. And that's it. Okay, so this is a basic combat situation. 3 enemies, in single room, you have a weapon, and you have to kill all these guys. And in a quick way, the whole combat lasts maybe 4 to 5 seconds. It's really a short thing. But it's still strategic, so it's not, because it's short, that it's not just strategic, sorry. So first thing, when you do combat, any kind of combat, first thing, but that's an obvious thing, do lots of feedback on particles. If you hit an enemy, you expect to have blood or anything leaving its body, which tends to explain he's about to die. You should have the enemy react, like getting hit and it hurts like a lot. You should have particles because you're hitting with a sword, so maybe you will have light trays or whatever, and maybe stones on the ground because your weapon just hit the ground. So particles, like on every important feedback, which is like hitting the enemy or killing the enemy, like he explodes, you should have, of course, lots of particles, but that's an obvious thing. And again, you should have tight controls on cancels. Cancels, let's see a typical attack sequence. This is an attack sequence. You have a key press, then so the player is pressing the attack key. So you have a charge, which is like getting your weapon ready and trying to hit the enemy. And then you have the hit and the recovery time, which is getting back to idle. Okay. During the whole recovery, the red part, you cannot do anything. This is like the penalty part. You hit the enemy, so you have to wait before doing anything else. But everything else in this, you can cancel. If you want to press cancel button at any time, even 1 frame before the hit, you can cancel. Because there is nothing worse, I think, in a game that, for example, when you are about to hit an enemy and you notice someone is about to hit you, so you know you're about to get hit, so you would like to dodge, you press the dodge button and nothing happens because you're locked and your character cannot do anything at this point. So at this point, the thing is that you will probably say it's the game's fault. Again, it's not your fault, it's the game's fault. You see the action, you understand what happened, you decide to cancel and to press a dodge, and dodge doesn't happen for some reason, which is beyond comprehension. And also a small thing, which is like the just-in-time jump I showed you earlier. The attack queuing. It's a general concept. For example, if you do play lots of MMORPG, you have this kind of concept when you have an action which is under cooldown. If you do press again while it's under cooldown, it will queue, actually, So your action will play when the first one is finished. So it's a kind of queue of action, which is really transparent thing. Usually you don't have to bother about that. But when you don't have that, for example, in this kind of thing, if I press attack once, and before the hit I decide I would like to attack twice, I just press the attack again, and the attack finish, and nothing happens, because I pressed the attack during the previous one. So if there is a queue, it will register that, okay, you asked for an attack during the previous one, so you will do 2 attacks, and will be automatic. You don't have to bother. And that's the kind of thing, also, if you disable it, it's instantly painful. Like, you really suddenly feel that something is wrong. It's really slow or badly balanced. So the queuing is really a small kind of detail, really shitty thing to implement, because this one can be tricky, but it's really useful, especially in a combat and action game. You know what? The surprise that we got is actually making better controls allowed us to make harder combats. You know, the first thing when I said this kind of explanation, people would just tell me, oh, if you can cancel during the casting time, so maybe it's just making things too easy. So you can basically interrupt anything and go away. Yeah, you're right. But because of that, we can have like 5 enemies around you, and you have to pay attention to everyone. And if you don't pay attention, you get hit. But it's your fault. It's not the game fault. So we can actually, with better controls, we can actually make things harder. And believe me, at the beginning, we decided we wanted to make Dead Cells quite a hard game. So players that did play it may see what I mean. So actually, better controls make things harder. And this is the takeaway for this. It should always be the player's fault, like always. It should never feel like it's a game fault. For some reason, you press a control and nothing happened and nothing expected. You jump between 2 platforms and you fail, and it should have worked, but you don't know why it didn't. It should always be the game's fault, really. It's for me, it's a general mantra. If at some point the player can blame the game, it will be some kind of, it will be unfair for him, because he will feel it's not about its skill, it's about the rule of the game, which were not exactly fair for him. So making sure that most of the time it's the player's fault and not the game's fault, it's a good way to approach this kind of question. And it will force you to make this kind of core loops as good as possible. Also, this is a small balancing parenthesis. We decided, because of the number of enemies, we decided that each combat in this game should take no longer than 2 seconds, which is quite short, but it's also quite long when you are in an action game. 2 seconds is really like you putting 2 hits on an enemy, something like that, and he dies. So, because we have like 1,000 enemies in a single run, so it's already a bit long. But because of that, we decided that, okay, so if you do an average combat, it's 2 seconds. But if you don't take risk, like you use a bow, or you use a turret that will kill the enemy automatically, it's fine, but it will take just a little bit more time. But you can play the whole game like this. If you want to play with grenades and bows and turrets and everything that kill things for you and you don't have to get involved, it's a low-risk situation, but you can play this way. And if you decide to go for a high-risk approach, it's less than 1 second, like a very heavy broadsword that have a long casting time. Usually, it one-shots the enemy. It's an idea. Because you are about to get hit during this war phase and you are almost locked in position. So if you take risk, it's 1 second. If you don't take risk, it's 2. And if you're really staying away from the combat, it's more like 3-4 seconds. And these small things actually helped a lot on balancing. Because of that 3 categories, we could actually define every weapon in the game. So each time I create a weapon, I just say, okay, is it a risky one? Is it an average one? Or is it a low-risk one? And depending on each category, it goes for like 80 DPS for the really easy one. It goes for 120 DPS for the average weapon, and you go up to 200 DPS for the risky ones. Okay? So it helped a lot balancing things because it was a very basic concept, but actually it helped a lot by spreading content. And thing is, it was some kind of accidental things, but actually speedrunners do like this thing. The fact that you can take a risk and you will be rewarded by going faster. And it was a small side effect, which was accidental, as I said, but a nice one because we do have a few speedrunners playing the game, so that's cool. And also, my wife is liking the other opportunity. she's not into action game like at all. And actually, she do play the game, and she's like 100 hours in, which is a lot for me at last. And she do play the game, and she do play in a quite slow-paced way. But it's fine because we allow that, and it just takes more time, but she has time, so she's fine with that. So this is it about dead cells. Let's take another example, which is completely different. Disclaimer here, I didn't work on this game. It's just an example. It's copyrighted like in any possible way, but it was developed by Capcom. And this is Phoenix Wright. Do people know what Phoenix Wright is? Yep. Okay, that will be interesting because Phoenix Wright is basically... So this is Phoenix Wright, which is basically an attorney simulator game, which is you are in a court. It's on Nintendo DS, I think. You are in a court and you are taking action, and you have to prove that someone has killed someone, or the opposite. You have to prove its innocence. It's really a great game. So if you didn't play this one, and it's really an incredible game, because even if it's a text-based game, and even if it's all about finding the culprit in any kind of affair, it's actually a game where you feel badass. You know, you feel like you're really powerful. You're strong in some way. Everything is quite intense, exciting, and the reason is, in my opinion, that they took quite a lot of time tweaking the way the text is displayed in this game. Like, I think maybe most of the development probably went into this small thing, and they made reading text fun and dynamic. And let's see quickly how they did that. How did they achieve that? First thing, they do use like a lot of flashes, you know, white flashes on screen, on camera shakes. So every time you have something important that happens, you have this kind of camera shakes. Very, very short one, but every intense point in the text is outlined by camera shake and white flashes. You have the text speed. If you pay attention, I will show you in the next video, you will see that the text speed actually changes a bit when it's something which is like slow paced and is explaining something. And when someone is getting angry, it's really getting really fast. And you saw that in the previous video. And sometimes you will have stop in the sentence. Not exactly, not always on a comma or anything. Somewhere it will just stop in the middle of the text and continue. Because it's just like the player is actually talking. So just like he's hesitating and saying things, not sure. And finally, they also do use lots of sounds and feedbacks on audio feedback. Like any kind of this kind of noise and everything like this. So everything, all this package makes actually reading text actually feeling good. So now observe. Okay, camera shake. The text speed so far is quite okay, not too fast. Slow text, a little bit slower, very slow because he's hesitating. We're not sure what's going on. Maggie Bird, the sound, and the sound again. Camera shakes and white flash again, and everything is going faster now because something happened and the story is unveiling. So. You see, this is just basically a game about reading text and asking questions to characters. But because they took quite a lot, I think lots of time making sure that just displaying the text was something what was really properly done with all the feedbacks, particle and sounds and everything. It actually feels right. It feels like you're really like watching something which is intense, but it's still basically just reading text. It's nothing else. It's really a basic thing. So if you imagine this game without everything like that, it will be quite boring because it will be just text displaying, and it will be really different. It will done be Phoenix Wright. So that's almost it. Oh, there is a hidden conclusion there. So just in case, if you slept for the whole presentation, the takeaway here is a very few basic ideas, actually. When you make a game, you should really know what your core loops are. You should understand not about the game concept, the global things, but really about what your player will actually do from the beginning till the end, the very basic things that it will do. And if you know that, you can actually make them right. You can make sure that every basic action will be right. And you should always make sure that the basic actions are always easy to achieve. If it's not a game about making difficult jumps and everything like this, but you will have to jump, make sure that jumps is actually easy. Make everything possible to make sure that jumping between two platforms is actually easy. And first, very important last thing, your basic action should always be fun. Like, again, this is something that your player will do from the beginning till the end. Maybe we'll have fun with the Roguevania kind of thing. Maybe we'll have fun crafting on farming items or whatever. But basically, we'll just jump and kill enemies. So you should make sure that even that should be fun. And everything else should be an added value on your product. But the basic thing should be always be treated properly. So in the end, it's when we say it feels good, in a game, basically it's really all about putting effort where it matters, making sure that you understand what your game is really about. It's not Roguevania, it's a platform game, it's a combat game, and making sure all these small things are treated properly. So thank you. If you need to, you want to? Oh, yes.
喂。对。
Hi, I have a question. I've seen a tutorial on illustrating how the Deck Cells characters sprites was generated from 3D and project back to 2D. So I was wondering, have your team ever considered using 2D, or is it too hard for an action game?
Actually, we wanted to make a pixel art kind of game, but we knew that at this time we just had one artist, so it was really not possible to make every animations and every backgrounds and everything. So we are a very small team of 8 people, so that's why. So at first we wanted to make a pixel art game. We wanted to make a 2D games because it was Castlevania-ish kind of thing. So we wanted to feel like a Castlevania in a good way. And but we knew that it was not possible to make all the assets alone. So we decided to try different things, and actually we made the characters in 3D. So we have made everything in 3ds Max. Every characters and animations are made in 3ds Max, and we just rasterize them, which we were shooting them in 2D and putting them in the game. It's really like a very old technique, like in Diablo 1 or this kind of thing. And the important part here is really cost effective. We did that because not because we wanted to have this kind of render, but because it was really an optimization of the process. We couldn't afford to make this much asset, but we wanted to have like 60 FPS animation and something which is really fluid and everything. So we knew we had to do something else. And also, when you are asking your artist, okay, I like your character, but maybe now you've done every animation, I would like him to have a belt and a small bag here, something like that. And if it's made in 2D, actually you have to redo pretty much everything, which is really not optimized for a company. And there was a great talk about that on, I think it was on Vagrant or something like this, some kind of, where the reason they decided to use, also on one of the Castlevania, so they use this technique of 2D elements, but with pins that allow you to move things. And they explained that it was also a good practice for making lots of content, and it was easy to make retakes, to modify things, and it was not too cost effective. It was not too costly. So that's why.
Okay. Hello? All right. Hey, so basically my question is, earlier you talked about how core loops are much more important than content, and you should always prioritize your core loops being fun before you think about the content. But one of the confusions I've been having is that in an example like Phoenix Wright, the core loop, which makes it fun, is that you feel like a badass, you can see the text flashing, and it proceeds and escalates as the case goes on. But one main thing that stands out in that is that it is very much dependent on the case in question, which is also the content in question. So if you're testing a core loop and you want to see if the core loop is fun, but you cannot know that without the content, how do you know that when you're testing if something is wrong because of the core loop being wrong or if something is wrong because of the content being wrong? Because in something like Phoenix Wright, feeling like a badass might also greatly lean on the case itself being something that the player is emotionally invested in. Like your core loop could be completely right, but the content could also be, like the case itself could be something really stupid and the player's not invested in it at all. The core loop's completely fine, but it's the content that has the problem. How do you determine if something is the core loop's problem or the content's problem?
That's a great question because you're actually totally right on this. And the thing is, I always assert that the gameplay and the content should be right because this is you making a game, so the content should be as good as possible. This is a basic assertion for any team. When you're making a game, you're just making sure that it's actually a good game. So I always assert that the content is right. So that's why I try to focus a little bit more on core loops because these small things, usually they just get ignored because, okay, it's just a platformer game or it's just a text game. So, okay, we just display text and that's it. And it will be probably the same until the end of the game. It will stay the same. So, but you're right. If your content is wrong, of course, the game will be feeling wrong and nothing will work. But as I said, it's really about accepting the idea that, okay, the content should be right. At least we're trying to make everything right. So if it's still not fun, maybe it's time to just have a look at the basic things. Is it about displaying text? Is it about jumping? Maybe the level design is great, but for some reason it's hard to explore because it's not fun. Something is not fun. But I don't have any clear answer on this one because, as I said, I always pretend that the content is right when you go for it. But it's really not about saying the content is not important because that's really totally wrong. But it's really about saying don't forget the core loops, and especially try to focus a little bit more on core loops because yesterday on the Subnautica talks there was a thing said which was similar. You can make pretty much any kind of game. It will have success, in my opinion. I think it will have success if you make sure that it's actually fun at its core, like a good 2D engine or a good FPS, and everything was taken with great care. But if you do like a very deep story thing and lots of big adventure game, but the UI is like a shit or anything like this, it will probably fail on stores because people will not see your content. They will just stop at the beginning, which is a shame. But yes, content is really important. You're right.
Hi. I think the core loops idea is very good, and our studio rely heavily on this method. By the way, how about the composition loop of the dead cells? How did you make players play your game again and again? Thank you.
This was a very big problem at the beginning because we knew that we wanted to make the death permanent in this game. It was really a permadeath kind of game, but we didn't want to have the frustration of dying and losing everything. So it was really a matter of experimentation and iteration on making the death actually a good, like a fun situation. So, you know, when I told about the fairness of the game, this was really the most important thing at this point. We decided we should never at any point feel that your death was unfair. So if you get killed by something and you feel like it wasn't your fault because you couldn't see this thing coming or you couldn't avoid this attack, it's really not a good thing because you're dying and it's not your fault. So you're like really hating this game for that. So I think the most important thing was that making sure that every time you get killed, you just say, "Oh shit, I could have dodged this. I could have fall back and avoid this attack. It was quite easy. Okay, it's really my fault." And every time we make sure that the player actually feels that, for us it's quite easier to make the acceptance or whatever of the death easier. It's easier to accept that you get killed. So you have lots of various things around that, which is unlocking stuff and having permanent upgrades and everything. But this is really just the normal things that you do in roguelike. You just have, in roguelite, I precise, which is unlocking permanent things. So when you die, you don't lose pretty much everything. But making sure that death is fair was really the most important thing. If you get killed by something which was behind you and you have no way to see it, it's not your skill. It's really about, oh, okay, it was off screen. I couldn't see that. So.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I have a question that, well, there are a lot of roguelike games and like platformers on Steam right now. And what do you think that makes your game stand out? And what was your thought process when you try to make a game and you think I must make this game really unique and different from others?
For the unique point, it was really, as I said, the Castlevania roguelike thing, because you do have lots of platformer roguelikes. By the time you had Rogue Legacy, you did have Spelunky, of course, or this kind of game. But most of them, they either had really great gameplay, like a very good exploration and generation, really good gameplay, but bad controls. And they did have good controls, but bad gameplays. And we just approach the thing in a very basic way. It's not meant to be bragging here, but we do admire Blizzard. You know, Blizzard, the company who made Diablo, World of Warcraft, and everything. And they do work pretty much. We do work pretty much as they do, because they don't make crazy things. They don't make like crazy games like No One Saw coming and everything. It's just really simple games, very normal concept. It's just a card game. It's just a standard RPG. It's just normal FPS. Nothing fancy here. But they do polish every single detail like crazy. And for us, it's the same. We don't pretend to make something which is like really original. So this is not the way we want to do things. But we think, and I believe, that if you do your game really polished and everything, nothing is left like in a raw state or anything like this, if you really polished everything, I think it should be fine. Most of the time, player will understand that, and it should be fine. So this is the way we decided to make that set. We knew we couldn't make something really crazy and original, but we knew that we could work this recipe and making actually right. So.
Does your wife die a lot as well?
She definitely does, and she hates me for that. She always saying me like, why did you design this fucking monster there? This one is really, so yes, I do hear that. But she dies a lot, and every time she says, okay, just one more try. And for me, it's a small victory inside. Say, okay, even if she accepts that, that's fine for me.
That's an interesting point, because I see in a lot of games where they have a safer strategy, like which would be slower, that a lot of people take that strategy, even if that strategy is inherently less fun, or like just because it allows them to progress the game, right? So if you have that kind of strategy in the game, it can really make people play the game the way you don't want them to play. But like in your case, it somehow magically worked out.
So that's because at one point, as a game designer, I decided, okay, I know I won't force people to play the game the way I want. I can do that, but it will probably lead to some very strange situations, like getting some kind of the ghost in Spelunky, this kind of creatures that force you to go fast. And actually, at one point, we decided, okay, we cannot force players to play the games the way we want. We have to let them play the way they want and make sure that actually each because it's just basically 3 categories of people. Each category has something interesting, some kind of reward for doing this way. So if you go, for example, in the game, if you go fast, you will have access to timed door which are doors that close at like 2 minutes in the playtime. So if you go there and you reach this kind of door in time, you can open it and get loot behind, which the idea is to compensate what you have missed before. So it's really about balancing things. And if you decide to go slowly, you just take time, you get all the normal loot, but nothing which is timed doors. Timed doors are not for you. By the way, if you want to, I don't know if you have time left. I have a few bonus slides if you want to.
About 10 minutes.
10 minutes? Oh, it's fine. You want a few things? It's not about gameplay this time. It's really about early access and marketing. So it's a little bit different, off topic, but it might be useful. Is okay? Okay, so let's do that. Yeah, postscriptum. It was all stage. No, that's because yesterday I realized that I was really short on time, and I thought, okay, I should maybe add a few things just in case. So this is a just in case thing. So about the early access, a few tips. If you plan to go on early access on Steam, if you plan to go on early access, for us it was something that we planned to be 1 year long. That's because when we went on early access, our game was pretty much ready. It's just like it content, but all the basic things were there and everything was running fine. And it was like not an alpha version. It was really a vertical slice of the game, the first third of the game, and it was really almost complete. So we could announce at this time, that, okay, everyone, we are going on early access, and it will last 1 year. Because when you go on early access, the worst thing that happens, and people just hate that, is early access that never ends. So if you know that your game is quite on track, make sure that you announce how long you plan to do on early access. But actually we did 1 year and a half, but we communicated a lot on this, so it wasn't a problem. And this is it, communicate. And if you do early access, there was a really great thing on this yesterday. The early access is like a show. You're not making a beta or something. You're not something private. You're making a show. So you have to animate things. You have to create events. You have to push updates, and you have to make sure that it's more like a show and some kind of marketing show more than a test. You see, it's about. Of course, if you go on early access, that's probably because you want to get paid a little bit earlier. So that was the case for us. When we pushed the early access, it was because it was really the last chance project. So we were about to bankrupt. So we decided to go on early access. But thing is, we did communicate like a lot with people. So every time we decided something, every update that we decided to push, we did communicate a lot on that. And very small things that proved to be like a completely very minor detail, but which was really great. And please do that if you do an early access. It's really a great thing. Actually, it was accidental, but we have patch notes for each update. We have a patch note, and each time we publish a patch note, we have a small label on it before some points in the patch note, which says "inspired by the community." Given by the community. And each time player actually reads the patch note, they see like maybe half points are actually from the community, like new ideas, new thing, balancing. Every time something is from the community, we just label it in the patch note. It's a very small thing. We decided to do that just for no reason, actually. And actually, it was one of the most important things that we did in early access. It's actually showing players that every time we push an update, maybe half of the content is from the community. And it makes sure that everyone understands that when they suggest something, when they give feedback, actually it goes in the game. They can actually modify the game in some way. So we don't plan to take everything, but we have to inform people that few things are from you guys. So when we do that, we just have a small label on the patch note. Also, don't overpromise. It's really difficult because you want to please people. You want to say them, okay, don't worry, this game will be great. It will have a multiplayer. It will have a whatever. And it's really difficult not to say that, not to say to people, oh, don't worry, we'll have this at the end of the game. But maybe not. For example, we were hesitating on multiplayer on this game, and we decided to scrap every multiplayer things, but we did code a lot of things, but we decided to give up the multiplayer thing anyway. And hopefully, luckily for us, we didn't say anything about that. We did a few Discord discussion about that, but very small things, but we didn't announce anything about multiplayer. So when we scrapped it, it was okay, because we didn't announce promise anything. So if you don't plan to do it and you are like not 100% sure you're about to do it, don't announce it. Don't do it. And that's a good and a bad thing because it hurts the feelings a lot. But most important feedbacks are the negative ones. When people just say, "Oh, I love your games," and okay, that's fine, and you don't have any new information from that. You just have someone who actually likes your game, which is great because it's of course pleasant to hear. But you, as a game developer or game designer, you don't have any new information. And actually, most important feedbacks are coming from negative feedback. So it's hard to read them. So anyway, you have to, but don't at any time get involved in them. Don't talk to people giving you negative feedback. Just maybe just okay, we read that. Okay, it's we took note of that. Okay, but nothing else. Don't go into debate. Leave that to someone whose job is that, like a community manager or something. But as a developer, okay, you can post on forums. You can say, okay, I saw that. Fine, thank you, and thank you for feedback. But nothing more. Don't get involved in debate. Let that. This is a job, a full-time job, and very difficult one. And also, this is a very important thing. Please, don't underestimate your price point. It's very difficult for other games when you have a very good game, which is really cheap, because it sets like some kind of milestone. People, if you have made mobile games, you know what happened on mobile store and app store. The price was really like super low on, especially on Google and on Apple. So it's because everyone was depreciating their own price. They said, okay, I want my game to be cheap because I want to sell a lot. But that's not a good thing. If someone likes your game, he will pay if your price is right. It's not about having a cheap price. It's really about having the right price. So please, if you do a game, if you do a great game, especially, put it at the right price on the store, because it won't change pretty much, seriously, it won't change pretty much anything on your sales, but it will change everything for other companies. Because when someone will want to publish a game, if he sees your great game, which is like €5 or $5, it will be, okay, we'll have to put my game on $5, but maybe I won't survive to that price. It's really too low for me. So put your game at the right price. Don't underestimate your game, and choose the right price point. And again, let's go on marketing, a few things. Streamers. Yes, that's something also that was said yesterday, so that might be true. So yes, we didn't do any kind of great marketing on this game. Actually, we did, but at the end, when we had money. But when we haven't money, we couldn't afford to make any kind of great marketing. So we just addressed streamers. And a very specific thing here, we addressed the small ones, the very small ones, like the ones that has 100 viewers, like very small ones, followers, not viewers. Like when you contact these guys, actually most of the time they are surprised because they are not used to get contacted by game company, and we give them keys and they do play the game. And when you have all the small streamers talking about your games, you will have the medium one talking about your game, not because you said them, because the small ones did play. And if you go there, and it's like a pyramid, you will have the big one, or the big one, or the huge ones. So I don't think, I'm not sure it will work like all the time, but that's the way we did it. We just took lots of care about the small ones, the really small ones, and from there we didn't have to pay anyone for any kind of big streamers or anything like this. It was just too expensive, and it would be too risky, so we didn't do that. Oh, and please distribute your keys. If you make a game, don't be afraid. Never say that if I give a key for free of my game, it will be like a sale I lost. It's not something that you lose when you give a key. It's actually marketing, just marketing. You don't want to, at this point, at the beginning of the game, you don't want your game to be sold. You want your game to be known. And if you want your game to be known, it's really about giving keys and making players and streamers actually play your game. So don't hesitate, don't be too shy on this, and distribute your keys. Actually, the figures is wrong, because I thought it was 3,000 keys, but it's more like 10,000 keys. I checked it a few minutes ago, before the talk, and we distributed 10,000 free keys of Dead Cells on press, on streamers, on people that we liked, on pretty much everyone. And we were not shy about that because we knew it was not about losing sales, it was about getting known, as I said. So it's really important, don't hesitate. And most of the time, don't be shy on that. One last thing which was added on last minute, Twitch integration. We did that 2 weeks ago. Like it was some kind of crazy idea from the marketing guy. He wanted us to have some kind of Twitch integration, which is basically having tools in your game for the chat to interact with the streamer. So they can actually alter the game. They can do things in the game while the streamer is playing. So this is it's very basic, a very easy thing to do. It took us 1 week to implement everything on the Twitch API, and it allowed like a ton of view on the game. And it's really an easy thing. So just making a chat system in your game. You receive chat commands and you can send chat commands. It's a very basic one. And if you try Dead Cells with a Twitch integration, or you can see a lot of stream about that, you will see it's quite actually useful, and it does engage a lot more streamers and viewers. So it's a very basic thing, but something that I'm really happy that we did just before the launch. It was really useful. And that's it this time. This is a real ending. So if you have any extra questions, I'm not sure.
好，我们以热烈的掌声谢谢 Sebastien。